Hi, friends, and welcome to RobCast 100. We're here in the back house. Actually, I'm not even in the back house. Everybody, this is Elizabeth Gilbert introducing RobCast 100. I'm here with somebody amazing who I want you to meet. Oh, my word, my friends, it's a miracle. You are going to love this person. Oh, my word, I couldn't wait. As soon as I met him, I was like, I got to bring him on the RobCast. Rob Bell, introduce yourself to the people.
Oh, I'm already getting roasted, and I love it.
Listen, everybody, it is the 100th
It is.
anniversary
It
of
is.
the beginning of the RobCast. I can't believe you've done 100 of these already.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, to say another Rob Bell word.
Yes.
It's
an unbelievable miracle.
It's an unbelievable miracle, friends. And Rob, took some bad advice from somebody and decided to invite me on to be a special guest for the 100th. This is our fourth time doing this together.
Yes.
And we're gonna switch it up. I'm gonna interview you.
Yes. And when you suggested that, I was already laughing at the suggestion. So I was like, we have to do that.
We're gonna do it. So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for trusting me with your podcast. You'll be sorry that you did this. I haven't interviewed anybody since I was a journalist.
What was the last person you interviewed?
The last person I interviewed was See, you're already... No! Absolutely not!
I was like...
Absolutely not.
You totally
I totally jumped in. I was like, all right, let's do that.
I started interviewing you.
You are so
I was watching you.
Awesome. Did you see my tracking of that?
I saw you trying to remember who it was, thinking, oh, my word, she totally fell for that. She totally fell for that.
Rob and Rob's friends, the Robians. Do you have a name for your people, like the Rob Hive?
No, that gets a little weird.
Or the robber barons?
I think
the highway robbers.
Beyonce can name her people. You know what I mean?
That's good. That wasn't one of my questions. I just threw that in. So here's what I did when I was preparing, and I did prepare, because as a good eraser clapper from way back, I do my homework. So I thought of a list of questions of things that I have heard you speak about, either in public or on the RobCast or in our conversations, that have stuck with me, where I find myself repeating them or telling them to other people, or where I wished I had been able to hear you say more about it.
Oh,
so
wow.
These are all of those questions.
Oh, my word.
Shall
Great.
we begin?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is something that you said the other day. We were talking on the phone, and you said about a situation that's going on in my own life. You said, yeah, there are situations in life, and I'm going to paraphrase you here, and you can fix it if I'm wrong. You said there are things that we try to pray our way through, and there are situations that ask us to enter into them. And you seem to distinguish between those two acts. Am I hearing you wrong? Was there something, or can you even explain about what you mean by a situation that calls you in life, sometimes a very painful situation that asks you whether you're willing to enter into it completely?
Right, yeah.
Was I talking to someone else?
No, you were talking... Yeah, I think we were talking about sometimes you face a struggle, a challenge, a trauma, and it calls out this response and energy and vitality. Like, let's do something about this. Let's rally. Let's, and other times the situation is all about how powerless you are. Sometimes it's a call to activate your power.
Right.
To call everybody, to send an email around, to get everybody to raise money, to go do this, to go do that. But I think the thing you and I were talking about didn't have that. It was like, oh, this you just enter into it and you just feel its pain. This isn't going to be changed. And
what is the spiritual work of entering into something fully, no matter how painful it is? Versus, I mean, the alternatives would be, of course, to what? Pretend it's not happening, back away from it, numb yourself from it.
Oh, here's an example. How many parents, when their kid is in trouble, their first instinct is to fix them? Is to start giving the kid, well, here are 7 steps to fix this problem.
Right.
When your kid is in trouble because the trouble is a crying out, they're in great pain. So instead of just how quickly can we fix this and resolve the tension, why are they in great pain? And have I ever asked them and actually been willing to listen to their answer?
Oh,
which is a completely different posture.
right.
The one is like, oh, you're in trouble? Well, then what? She's giving you crap on the playground? All right,
Yeah.
well, here's 3 things you do.
Right.
As opposed to,
Or you got caught drinking and now you're grounded for a certain period of time.
right, we'll teach you to do that again.
Yeah.
Which sometimes that's,
It's not to say you can't do that,
but sometimes it's not about rallying and reaching down deep and finding all the strength in order to fix it.
right.
Sometimes, no, the first thing to do is to feel it and to enter way into the full experience of the loss, the bewilderment, the confusion, the disorientation. Because for many people in the modern world, we were taught that tension exists to be resolved, process to be solved, ladders are leaning up against buildings to be climbed. Do you know what I mean?
Or leaning up against air to be climbed.
Yes, exactly. So situations, the fundamental posture of any situation is to grasp it and master it,
Right.
which is,
God, I'm so guilty of that. Do you
yeah.
do that? Did you
Or think
did you
about
have
mu-
to learn how to not do that at times? Did you have to untrain
I think still learning.
puritanical, capitalist, Western American, like Midwestern, we can fix this, we can build this,
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah.
learn how to just relax into
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
emotional maelstrom?
And being trained as a pastor, you're giving people the answers.
Right.
You give people the truth,
Right.
and it fixes them at some level. And I just kept entering into situations where I remember doing a funeral, and the day or two before the funeral, at the funeral home with the family, and the long lost son who had been at odds with the dad who had just died and was at odds with all the family shows up from out of town, walks into the front doors of the funeral home,
geez.
walks all the way up, sits down in among all the family members who hate him, and is like, I need to have a role in planning this funeral as well. And like just layers. And then the mom and daughter, the widow and daughter, look at me and are like, you have to get him out of here right now. So I just kept being in situations that
And
were
do they
so.
teach you at seminary how to handle
Yeah, right.
that?
I just kept finding myself in situations where there's no owner's manual here.
Right.
There's no like ABC, and then everything will be fine. And I think that began to change me, and especially noticing that the whole religious construct was, oh, you're a pastor. What's the answer?
Right.
Oh, well, actually, for as long as people have been talking, this has been unresolved.
So let me
This
just get right
particular
on
issue.
fixing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
All of the smartest people on whatever this question is were like, yeah, there's a mystery there. So I was just in this different, because if you're in business, you'd be like,
Right.
well, I think you'd put together a business plan, you'd have a spreadsheet, you'd look at the analytics, you know what I mean? In other areas,
If
if
you're
it
a
was
coach,
in medicine, yeah, your coach.
okay, you need to work on your upper body
Yeah.
strength and
Right,
get
right,
your
right.
yeah.
And here were your reps last week. Now let's get your rep. And I just found myself constantly in these situations where it just didn't work like that. It was incredibly humbling.
So life broke that out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I'd be doing a Q&A and somebody would ask a question, and I love a live Q&A because you never know what's coming.
I do too.
You and I love them.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
it so much.
good.
I love the chaos.
But I would notice sometimes somebody would ask a question, and it would be in the form of a question, and I would leave the stage and walk into the crowd and just give them a hug. And then they would say, thank you. And I realized early on, oh, they asked a question, but what they were asking for was solidarity. And solidarity is very different than a solution.
Right.
And that just started to shift things. Yeah.
You spoke once about, and this is again, I'm picking up like things you've thrown away, like used tissues, that you probably don't even ever remember saying, but that stayed with me, or I wanted more on it. But you were talking about a little bit the trauma of being a young pastor and being responsible for the pain of your congregants and having people come to you with an amount of pain that is almost impossible to hold.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk about what that did to you physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and how you talk to other people who are in the healing world about
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to, if it's even possible to hold that amount of pain.
Yeah, because you bear it in your body,
Yeah.
and there will always be another person who has something they're asking you to carry. So I at first, of course, you're young and you have a lot of energy, so you assume you can just tough it through, but there's just too much, and you're not able to. It's just not bearable, and your very cells get exhausted at some primal level, and so I think I realized why people would talk about surrendering someone to God. Is when I was first starting out, I had this thing like, oh, now you have to carry them along and figure it out. And then I began to see myself as a link in a chain.
Right.
They were, they fully belonged to the divine long before they got to me. I may have a chance to say something or be something for them. But in trusting people that they don't belong to you was really, really important. And oftentimes I realized it was the ego that was like, I'm the person I'm the one who's going to fix this person. Mm-hmm. The ego loves the idea. I know nobody could fix them, but I'm the one who's going to be able to
No, I've
get
never
through
done
to
that. I
them.
don't even understand what you're
I'm
talking
the
about.
one who's going to have.
I'm going to need you to outline that more because I'm just in
But
the
this
dark about what
thing-
you're saying.
Yes. Allow me to tell you some stories. And
Wow.
I think it also then the thing that we had started a church and it got really big. So I was very young and had all these people like.
You had 10,000 people whose
Yeah,
spiritual
it was
lives you were sort of formally responsible for in a way. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to even say that, but that is the
right.
job description.
It was very surreal. And I think what happened to Kristen and I is the job was undoable. So it like broke me at really, you're going to keep up with this? You're going to go to the hospital every day? You're going to, like, how many funerals are you going to do? Because there were weeks when I would do sermons, prison visits, hospitals, prison, like the full, like, and sometimes it was just, you'd almost be numb from the stuff that you'd seen. You'd be in the hospital with a family whose 16-year-old boy had committed suicide, and they're about to take the tubes out.
Good
And his
Lord.
sister is up in the bed with him stroking his hair. And then I'd like drive home to my family. It was just like literally couldn't bear it.
What happened
And in what?
to you when you couldn't bear it? How did that,
Well,
what did that look
a
like?
couple things.
So
When
that
people
people who are
say-
experiencing these symptoms in their own
Yeah.
life.
Well, then when people would say things like, wow, how do you keep your ego in check when all these people are listening to you? I would like look at them dumbfounded like, no, it doesn't work that way. The last thing on earth I'm thinking right now is, man, I'm great.
so
You know what
good
I mean?
at this.
What I'm staring
So
at is a
good at
mountain
this.
of people's. And the interesting thing also was people, to this day, when people are, there's a thing of, I just want you to know. This is what I'm going through. I just want you to know. Keep me in your prayers. Which is very meaningful to me. It's also like, wow, now I know that. I mean, there's something, even this far into the modern world, people still have a trust that they can tell you something and you'll keep it in confidence. So you're carrying around
So you're a vault of secrets.
unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable. Yeah. And things people will say. A book signing 3 weeks ago. Family come through the line. Dad, mom, probably mid-30s, like perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect clothes, like beautiful. Maybe a 4-year-old little talkative, cute boy and a baby. Like picture perfect. Like strikingly so. You know what I mean?
There's a part when you say that, there's a little voice in my head that goes, ruh-roh.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, dear.
So if you thought about it long enough, you'd be like, this family is so perfect. So
Oh, dear.
I hug them and we take a picture and we sign a book and then they go on signing books. 10 minutes later, I look to because the line is coming from the left. I look to my right and the wife is standing there sobbing. with just tears, and she says, "My husband is divorcing me, and I can't bear this." And just stands there gushing, and then turns and walks away. Like that stuff, all the time. Airports, cities, it's just anywhere.
You know,
Yeah.
when I was in India, became very good friends with a monk named Swami Vasudevananda. I'm looking at my friend Cheryl because she knows him, and you can see his face in your imagination.
Swami
Swami Vasudevananda. Vasudevananda means
Dave.
Dave. Yeah. Dave, the bliss of Dave, the bliss that is Dave. So Monkey Dave, it means the God that lives in the person who lives inside the heart of the God who lives inside your own heart. It's this sort of very intricate sort of Sanskrit word, but anyway, he was
Wow.
beautiful, compassionate person who'd spent his life serving, and he was there on retreat because he had cracked. And he was walking around he was there at the ashram, but of course everyone knew he was this monk, so they were always approaching him and wanting things from him, and he was supposed to be there restoring himself. So he finally just got a sign on his chest that said, "I am in silence." And I knew him, so we went for a little walk one day, and he said, "These robes that I wear are a shingle around it's like I put a shingle up on my business that says, 'Come to me with your most unsolvable pain.'" That is what I'm advertising when I wear these saffron robes everywhere that I go. And he said, "I've been doing this for 50 years. And I got to a point where I was like, I can't even do this 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
And then he went back in, but he went for retreat for a few months, and then he went back into it.
Yeah, and I've seen this often happen. You have to reboot the system and then come in with a different. It's almost like you have to step back and then come in with a new mindset. And you have to begin by taking really good care of yourself, because otherwise you have nothing. And so you start with, how do I live with a rhythm of life that's actually sustainable so that I can do this, because I want to do this work and I want to help people for a long time. And not just survive in 5 years, but I want to be more full of life in 5 years.
We
Like
have to do
literally
better
have to
than
start there.
surviving.
Exactly.
We have to do better than
So if
surviving.
it's just
yeah.
like, well, I just want to be here in 5 years. No. I want to be here with more life and more ideas and more joy and more hope in 5 years and in 10 years. So I sort of had to reboot my life over the years to figure out how that works. And then you have whatever space you can to do the work, then you just throw yourself into it and you do everything, you do what you can. But you're always, always, always cognizant of, is this sustainable? Because you're just like a long play here.
Is this why you do not have a physical church anymore?
Oh, great question.
Unless you have one that I haven't seen.
No, I wouldn't say no, because the last 3 years, when I was this would have been 5 years ago, the last 3 years at Mars Hill were great. Were sustainable.
So what was the new approach you brought that was different so that it didn't undo you? Because it wasn't like there were any less deaths, any less divorces, any fewer suicides and accidents.
Part of it was realizing there are other people who can do this and do this better. So the job isn't to do it all. The job is to empower and equip and set other people free to do what they're here to do.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing, which means you have to then be fine people doing it how they would do it. So you're like passing it off.
Right.
You're like, you could head up that whole thing, and that means you have to be fine with people being really great. You know what I mean?
I didn't see that coming. I thought
Yeah.
she said you have to be fine with people doing it wrong.
Yeah, no, it's the other
I
thing.
guess we just saw a little bit into my soul there.
Yeah, because that is the first move. The first move
Right.
among leaders is,
Oh God,
well,
somebody's
if
gonna
I turn these people over, they're going to make a mess of it. Yeah, you're right. And only when there's a risk that they'll make a mess of it have you actually empowered others. And you also have to be even more fine with them doing it great and
that's
having
amazing.
ideas you never would have had, and then being the first person to celebrate that. You really, truly have to get your ego out of the way. So that's the thing. And if that gets beaten, if you sort of start to see it in a different way, it's so much more freeing and even fun. And then you can be present with somebody who's in great pain and join them in that, because
Right.
you're under no illusion that somehow you're the answer. You are with them right now. So what we have is right now. So I
Right.
want to give this person everything, all of my best right here, right now. And then we'll see. And then we'll see what happens after that. But that's how it works.
I think one of the most powerful things I've heard you say was in a speech where you were talking about a woman whose fiance had passed away
Yeah.
right before their wedding, and you knew them
Yeah.
both very intimately, and you came to her house, and the house was filled with mourners, and everybody was in shock. And
She'd
she
just heard that her fiance had
kicked
been killed
in a
like
horrible
2 hours
industrial
earlier or
accident, like
something.
just
Yeah.
a nightmare.
Yeah.
And she threw everyone out of the house and said, "Except you, Rob. You stay here with
Everybody
me.
out of the dining room. Rob, take a
Everybody
seat."
out." And then she asked you a very powerful question.
Yeah, I
And
remember
the question was,
she sat down across the table and she said, "Why did God let this happen? Tell me why this happened."
when I heard you tell that story, the answer that you gave made me trust you more than I've ever trusted any other spiritual leader. Because
Yeah.
you said, I
Yeah, I
don't
said,
know.
I don't know. And nobody knows.
I don't
And
know.
anybody who gives you a clear and certain answer on that shouldn't be, I'd be very suspicious of. But I do know there's a house full of people here who love you and are going to walk with you through this. And we're not leaving, and we'll see. We'll see where this goes.
How often do you hear a person in a position of leadership say, I don't know?
Do you know?
How often do you hear a parent say to
Yeah.
a kid, I don't know? How often have I ever said it? Have you guys ever heard me say it? Not very often. I mean, it was so
woman
empowering for me to hear you say that too, because now I say that when people ask me the unanswerable questions in the audience, I just say, I don't know.
Right.
But I'll sit in this mystery with you for a while.
A couple weeks ago on tour, a woman said, "So wait, I mean, should I just let my kids know that I struggle and have questions and don't believe exactly the way I used to believe, and I actually have things that I'm still working through? You're saying that I should just let my kids know that that's what I'm?" I was like, "Oh my word, that is great! What better thing to show your kids?" By the way, I was doing an event with Dalai Lama, and
To
we're
drop a
taking
name.
questions. I didn't even pretend like I was dropping the name. I just went. And Dalai Lama has a guy in a khaki suit who sits behind him. And when he gets asked a question, he leans back. Guy with a khaki suit and clipboard leans forward, whispers in his ear. They discuss, maybe like a translation issue or something. Then he leans forward. So it's this arena. People can ask anything they want. There's like a moderator. Question gets asked. It's Dalai Lama's turn to answer. And he thinks about it, and then he leans back, converses with khaki suit clipboard guy. And I'm thinking, this thing is rigged. I'd like a guy with a khaki suit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Who's that guy? I want to know who that guy is.
Right,
Who's
right,
the
right.
advisor of the Dalai Lama?
Do I get one too? And then this takes 30 seconds, 40 seconds.
And he's
the whole
patient.
arena just sitting there.
Yeah.
Then he leans forward and he says, "I don't know."
Oh, I love that.
That was like a huge moment. That was April of 2008. So that would have been 8 years ago. That was a huge moment for me. I remember just like in my chair, just, you know, when you see something and you think, I'm going to remember this for a long time. Like that was a serious, serious moment in my growth to be like, Dalai Lama even has a clipboard guy.
And even the clipboard guy doesn't know.
How many guys back? And there's a guy, behind the clipboard guy.
And then, like the Native American thing, it's
Right.
clipboard
It's-
guys
it's
all the way to
clipboard
the
all the way
bottom.
down. I was
And
just gonna say,
nobody knows. None of them have
Turtles all
the
the way
answer.
down. Khaki suit guys. That was really, and
Wonderful.
actually also that the wisest people. I mean, if you go poets and theologians, you go scientists.
Right.
If you get to the very, 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 very Premier League,
The Premier League.
somehow all of that accumulated knowledge leads the wisest, smarter people to these key moments when they go, yeah, we really don't know. And Kristen and I heard Lisa Randall speak recently.
The physicist.
The physicist and it was, remember that? Like how many times she's like, yeah, it could be thermonuclear, well, I could only understand the first part of the sentence.
Could be.
It could be, it's pretty unclear right now.
Wow.
How many answers she would rattle off some complex theory, formula, theorem, then and say, but we're not quite sure. And it was really, really interesting to me. Like,
Doesn't it
oh,
make you trust her so much more?
it makes me trust her, and it makes me realize how we are fish swimming in the modern world of the Enlightenment that said there is an explanation to everything.
Right.
It's like we're so deeply immersed in it that we don't realize that for thousands of years prior to the past 300 years, it was always assumed there were great, vast chasms where you would just go, wow.
Just go swimming.
That the smartest, wisest person was the first person to go, yep, that's
Whoa.
pretty whoa. You know what I mean?
We don't even know what to do with this.
Which is where the poets and literature and
Yeah.
music and so many people stepped in and went, well, then we'll make a song to try to capture that, or we'll tell a story to try to capture that, or
Right.
this will be a novel that will try to get at that
Right.
thing. That's how actually we as humans have dealt with much of this.
I've been loving this Celtic prayer of approach. Do you know this Celtic prayer of approach, which was allegedly the prayer that you offer as you approach a new tribe, as you approach a new person, a new situation. And it's a sort of promise of how the state that you're going to be in as you approach.
Yeah.
I don't know it all by heart, but the first line is, I will worship your gods, I will drink from your well, I will not negotiate by withholding. And then there's a couple more lines, and the last line is, I hold no cherished outcome.
Man,
Which
that's
to
good.
me sounds like something God would say.
Yeah.
I hold no cherished outcome. And maybe it's easier to relax into helping people when you don't have a cherished outcome about their own lives, right?
Yes.
I don't know how your divorce is going to end. I don't know what to do but I'll be here, and I won't negotiate by withholding, and I'll drink from your well, and we'll approach this thing.
Absolutely.
Enough about me and my Celtic prayers of approach.
So good.
See, I grew up with the Celtic prayers of reproach, which is, why didn't you do a better job? Why can't you get it right? That's the Celtic
on.
prayer of reproach. What's the matter with you?
Somebody somewhere is angry. I just know it.
Oh, you said something once, and I believe you said this in the context of why you spend your life swimming through the cavern of mysteries. And I have been dying to ask you to go further into the statement, which you, again, may not even remember saying. We live on a planet, and I'm sick of nobody talking about it.
Oh, that's a Pete Holmes line.
Is it? Is that
Yes.
Pete's?
That's a Pete Holmes. We live on a planet, and I'm tired of not talking about it. And we were on tour, he and I, and he would do that line, and the crowd, and we built this whole thing between us of like he would start there, and then I would talk about hundreds of billions of galaxies and all that, and then we would end with, because you live, and we both say together, on a planet. And then he would yell, on a planet. And the crowd, every city, it just killed the crowd. People would laugh and cheer. On a planet.
You live on a planet.
Yes.
Explain why this is hilarious and also sometimes news to people. Because it is. I mean, it seems like, why, now that you mention it, why aren't we talking about this?
I think, I think this is how Pete Holmes, I think this is one of the bonds between Pete and I that we continue to this day is this whole thing is completely ridiculous and awesome and absurd and miraculous. And instead people are like, my Honda. do you know how many people will just tell you, yeah, the American Airlines, the frequent flyer program, but they don't give donuts. Delta does donuts. It's just all this conversation that's like, this is what we are talking about.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
This is really how you want to spend your Tuesday, is
Right.
there.
Just down in the I'm trying to put it into language. I think somewhere within me, at the heart of all of my work, is I refuse. That's actually, I think, what really, really moves me and drives me. I refuse to join that plodding. There's this ancient story about two dudes who are crossing
Does
the
it
Red
begin
Sea.
two dudes were crossing the Red Sea?
I think that it's a version.
I mean,
think you're
I
hearing
don't know
my
the
version.
Bible the way you do, or the
sea
Talmud.
has been Moses has parted the sea, and the two dudes are walking across the sea floor, and they're complaining because they're getting mud in their sandals, and the one is going, I get it between my toes, and
the
the
worst.
other one is like, take this just, And the ancient story goes as they walked along while two walls of water are on either side of them. And so I came across that probably 15 years ago, that story.
God, there's a sea urchin. I just stepped on it.
And the ancient midrash is essentially you can walk along the seafloor complaining about the mud and the sandals, or you can look up at the walls of water that have been held back for your liberation. And I think it probably goes back to your first question of seeing so many awkward family situations, death, prison, awful. I did a funeral where the dad, right before he died, rewrote his will, strategically thinking through how to have at his funeral the most amount of family members angry with the most other amount of family members.
Do you know what? I don't know how you come down on karma, but just to let you know, that guy's coming back. That guy's coming back because you don't get to ascend if you're still doing shit like that 5 minutes before you die.
There were landmines.
Damn.
Everybody at the funeral was,
can
and
you
I remember his daughter
imagine?
said to me, you know, he knew he did this so that this moment would be like this. He knew exactly what this was all planned and calculated. So I think I just saw so much stuff and was like,
God. We call that a disruption artist, by the way.
yeah, a disruption artist.
Yeah, it's an art form. It's you've dedicated your
Yes.
life
And people become
to
very good at it.
becoming
Yeah.
the grenade that just had the pin pulled out in every room that you walk
So
into.
something within me was like, no, my job is to keep pointing out, you're here and you're breathing. Look at this. What is this? What is this? So all the stuff I do, it actually drives everything I do.
You mentioned ancient teachings, which you often do. I've been wanting to ask you what your connection is to Hebrew, the language, which you seem to love playing with,
Yes.
even in the shallows, right? Like, I know you're not a Hebrew
Right.
scholar,
Right.
but I didn't just call you shallow.
Oh, no, you said in the shallows. I
In
love
the
that.
shallows,
That's
right? In the
that's
shallows
so
of
well said.
like, because I hang out in the shallows of Italian. I'm happy
Yes.
to just be up to my ankles in Italian.
Oh, that's all you. That's
like
that's enough.
picking mollusks out
That's
of the
enough for a
out of the
lifetime.
like I
Yeah.
mean I would love to be able to like go deep
Yeah.
blue diving in it, but but what is that language did you, because I have this theory about how one of the joys of other language is that it introduces to you uncorrupted parts of your mind, because our English has been used in so many bad
Yes.
situations in our life. So
Yeah.
there's this freshness. It's part of the reason I studied Italian when I was depressed, because I was like, well, I've never been depressed in Italian.
Yes. Yes.
Because every
Yes.
word in English associates with sadness for me right now. So I'm just going to find a language that I have no depressive
Yes.
associations with. So I want to know what your thing is with Hebrew and also with the Talmud and
Yeah.
the rabbinical teachings, because you talk about that more on your podcast than you talk about what I would think of as Christian teachings.
Yeah.
But maybe I just don't know anything about religion, which is
Well, I
possibly
think
true.
that first off, there are less. The Hebrew language there are less words than English words, so a Hebrew word has to be stretched and used for more things because there's less of them. So there's generally a 3-letter root, and then all these other words come out of there. But so it just naturally lends itself to a certain ambiguity about it could mean this, it could mean that. And so the Torah, first 5 books of the Bible, it's
Everything's up for negotiation about the translation.
so it's the black etching and then all the white space. And they talk about how there's the black letter and then the white space is all the room for the discussion and the debate and the dance. And some of them you'll even say, like, they'll say, like, the divine has spoken, the rest is commentary. So it is this vibrant sense. And then in Hebrew, the word for word is the word davar also means word. It also means thing. So like a word, as Heschel said, a word creates new worlds. So it's the fact that you heard something you hadn't heard before and suddenly a whole new world opened up. Because you're like, wait, that's possible? So a word isn't just a word. A word is like a thing. A word is an energetic activity creating something new in the world. So that's why the divine speaks and God said, let there be light, because in Jewish consciousness, of course, the creation would come through words, because words are like activating energy.
They certainly are.
So it's just,
yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. So I love that freedom to move and dance and interact with it. And what happened is I was sort of trained as a teacher where you're like, well, there's this text. What does it mean? What's the meaning? What's the thing? And then the job is to tell people this is what it means.
Because the teacher has the answers book
Right.
with the answers.
So there's a book by Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. He wrote a book called God Was in This Place and I Wasn't Aware of It, which is the story of Jacob waking up by the side of the road.
Yeah.
It's 10 different chapters. Each chapter is a fundamentally different interpretation of that one passage. It's 10 completely different, like mini sermons about God was in this place and I wasn't aware of it. So it was this assumption. They even talk about Torah has 70 faces. So it's like a gem and you turn the gem and then the light refracts differently each way that you turn it. So we're all in this endless discussion. We're all in this endless, we're dancing with it. It's just such a...
How did you learn this? Because did you study this?
No. So
where did you come upon
I
this?
came up through Christian seminary world, and then
I'm not picturing your
after-
teachers there being like, the Torah is a lapidary gem
then
that turns
one
from
of the-
70 angles with multiple
and then
interpretations.
and then after one of my first sermons, this Jewish guy, Richard Millman, comes up afterwards. He's like, you missed the whole thing. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, you just did a whole sermon on Jesus, but you missed, like Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. And I was literally like, Jesus was Jewish? I mean, you know what I mean? This
They
would have
didn't teach you
been
that in Michigan?
1996. And he's like, oh yeah, Last Supper, he holds up a cup. That's a Passover Seder. There's 4 cups. Each of the cups has a
And you're like,
meaning.
what now? Who shot
Which
who with a
cup?
what now? Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's all of a sudden.
You're like,
So
wait,
then
this
these guys,
goes back farther?
So this guy started bringing me. No, seriously.
I love this so much.
It was about that revolutionary for me. And then he literally started, like a good drug dealer, started bringing me, here's this week's stuff. And he'd have like this manila envelope with like a photocopied articles by Shlomo Gorin. And it would be like, oh yeah, this is a reference to that. And this is a reference to that. And all of a sudden, the entire Jesus-y thing became so much more dynamic. So then an example would be, there's something called a remez. Essentially, RMZ, a remez means hint. So a remez is when you would say the first half of something, and then your brain finishes the second half of the sentence. So there's a bunch of places where, like, Jesus says something, then everybody wants to kill him. And you're like, I don't understand. Why does everyone want to kill him for saying that? Oh, he just quoted the first half of the thing. And the crowd would have filled the second half and realized, oh, he just slammed us because of the thing happening in their brain. So all of a sudden I realized there's a whole brilliant wordplay hint going on there that is so riveting and so dynamic and so subversive. And all of a sudden everything got way, way more interesting. It literally went from like black and white to color.
Or black and white to black with a lot of white.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To go back to what the
Yes.
Talmud is and the Word of God. This reminds me of a story that I heard somebody at a storytelling thing tell one time. This guy was talking about how he got hired. He was a young Asian man who graduated with a science degree and got hired as a science teacher at a very strict Jewish school. Like full on, like deep. And almost didn't take the job because he thought, like, this is a religious school and they're hiring me to be a science teacher. I don't even know what I'm supposed to. And they said, listen, we'll give you the job, but there will be a rabbi in the room with you while you teach. And everything that you say, the rabbi will be allowed to offer another alternative.
Free to commentate on.
To commentate on. And he was like, well, that's oppression. And they're like, well, it's private, religious academy.
job.
We can kind of do whatever we want. You don't need to take the job. We'll find somebody else who takes the job. And he's like, he didn't know anything about Judaism, pure science, atheist kid. So he takes the job and he's like, I don't know if this is going to work. And he goes in on the first day and he's like, I'll just keep it safe when I'm teaching about science. We'll talk about chemistry. We'll talk about, just botany. We'll keep it like really. And the first half an hour, kid raises his hand and says, how old is the world? And he's like, oh, geez, like already. And he said, well, we think it's 5 to 7 billion years old. And he starts talking about the scientific idea. And as he's talking, the rabbi's in the corner going, making these noises going, and then when he's done talking, the rabbi says, well, we believe that it's, 5,000 years or 7,000 years, whatever it is, and it says here in the Bible this, and then he turns to the teacher and goes, but keep teaching, right? So they go to more, and he goes to the principal's office he says, I can't teach in this setting. Everything I say, this guy goes, well, here in the Talmud it says, here in the Torah it says, here in the Bible it says, and he contradicts him. He said, this is really disruptive, and it's oppression. And so they go to a meeting at the principal's office, and the kid says, I got to quit. I can't do this. And they said, why? And he said, because I can't teach. They're oppressing me. And how is he oppressing you? Well, he's giving his other opinion. And the rabbi said, I'm just giving the other opinion. And then what do I say? Keep teaching. Go on. I'm not telling you to stop teaching. I'm just offering these kids what our tradition says. And then I say to you, go on.
Keep teaching.
Keep teaching. And there's all this room suddenly
Absolutely.
For these two people to be in the same room.
Absolutely.
Because the kid's only version of religion is only one of us is allowed in this room.
Right.
Like, you get to stand up here or I get to stand up here. And he's like, no, we both get to stand up here. And he said, then I spent the rest of, he's like, this guy became such a dear friend. And he said, and I would listen for that little, well, we say, but they're in the same room and there's no tension.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what we say, this is what you say.
Yeah. And that very much happened to me is, oh, wait.
Can you imagine that in a Christian college?
There is very little agreement about any of this. And the more wise and the more ancient and the more learned you get, the more you get, yeah, it could be this, could be that. And and that's all actually, it's okay. It's not only okay, it makes everything way better.
You told me a story about standing up to somebody on Facebook, which is something I do not tend to do. And I wanted to talk to you about when you dig in. Because I don't often see you dig in. And it wasn't on a religious question. It was a woman who had watched your speech at the Super Soul sessions where you told the story of the person who told you to go to AA meetings in order to see what the world looks
we had
like.
That discussion. Yeah, I dug in on that
Well, first of all, talk about why you used to go to AA meetings, because I love this story.
That was actually after one of my first sermons. A guy named George Wixom came up to me and he said, you need to go to AA. And I was like, why do I need to go to AA? I'm not aware that I have an alcohol problem. I mean, I was totally caught off guard, and he said, because everything you'll need to know to learn about being a pastor, you'll learn in AA meetings. So I started going, and he said, when they come to you, just say, I'm Rob Bell, and I pass. I'm Rob, and I pass. So I went and sat in like a church basement and at AA meetings for a while. And to this day, I'm sure there are people there who I was just like multiple weeks in a row, like, I'm Rob, I pass. Like that guy.
Can't get through to that guy.
Tough. Yeah, it's a brick wall. But that was another.
And what did you, before we go to what the woman on Facebook said, which I'll remind you of in case you forgot, because I keep track of your Facebook wars more than you do. You probably don't even remember this.
No,
but
that
as
wasn't
somebody
Facebook.
who's so conflict averse, but it was, but the reason, the point that you made, what I remember when you're talking about that, is that you went there to see what life feels like when people have come to the end of their power and they've stepped into full surrender.
That's what I saw there, yeah. As I
Full
remember
surrender.
sitting there the first meeting, and it's like, and the meeting started, it's like, what is it? I was like, why is it feels like the molecules in the air are vibrating differently. What is this? What is this? What is this? And it took like, I don't know, a meeting or two to realize, oh, this is like a bullshit-free zone. Like this is a room where nobody has any energy left to pretend. And suddenly, so many other social settings, it's almost like everything flipped. And it was like, oh, this is what it looks like when no one's pretending, which now helps me understand every other setting is look how much energy everybody is spending. Things are fine. Things are fine. And this is something you go to if you're like, things are not fine. And it was...
And we're not even going to pretend.
Once you see that,
we're not even going to pretend that things are not fine.
Yeah, it's like once
anymore.
you see, then you can't unsee. Once you taste, you can't untaste. There's no going back.
There's an unzipping that happens in those rooms.
Yeah. And it was like, oh. So generally, whatever everybody is, there's something else going. There's always something else going on.
So this woman wrote to you deeply offended.
Oh yeah, I think that was maybe to the
Or to
website.
the
No,
website
I don't do
saying
like
like,
I don't ever do like a Facebook.
but
But
you
no,
responded, which
I
I thought
did
was
respond to that
interesting
one.
because she
Yes.
said you are insulting and making a mockery of people in recovery. You came to watch it like a sport. You know, we're not, those of us who are in recovery are not there for your pleasure to
Oh
come and
yeah,
hang out
yeah.
at AA meetings just to laugh and tell stories to make people laugh on stage. And you wrote back to her, if that's what you think I was saying, you absolutely missed my entire
Yeah, I
point.
don't mess
And
around
and
sometimes.
I was wondering, because I never do that. I never do that. And I thought, that's interesting. When do you decide to not mess around and just lay down and be like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong about me.
Oh yeah, and that was the
Because the
thing.
way I am is that I would probably spend a few sleepless nights being like, did I manipulate those people at the AA meeting? Am I like, but you just firmly were like, no,
Yeah, because
you're
I
wrong.
had some line like when you come to the end of yourself,
Yeah, when you come to the end
that's
of
when
yourself.
things get interesting.
Yes.
Which I realize that for many people, the only way to talk about things is with this literal, matter of fact, almost like plotting. And so the idea that I would say, when you come to the end of yourself, that's when things get interesting, sounded flippant.
She read that as flippant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a figure of speech. That's a way of talking about it. That's like somewhere between prose and poetry or whatever than it is.
Yeah.
So part of it was just like, you completely misunderstand what I was saying there. And I was not explaining anything. I was telling a story about how my very real experiences opened me up and helped me understand things. I just just laid it out for a paragraph.
And why did you choose that one to respond to? Because you, I know, get a heap of attacking
I don't
on the
see.
web nets. Why was that? Why
It's
there?
probably just the injustice of being that misunderstood.
Yeah.
Probably just the thing wells up within you, like, that's just not right that you would think that.
Yeah.
So I don't spend any energy defending myself, or it's just not anything I've done. But in that situation, you sent an email, I'm going to honor you with an email and tell you you're so
I'm going to
wrong.
honor you right in your face.
It's going to be kind. It's going to be
Yeah, no,
kind,
yeah, you
but
weren't, it
firm.
wasn't aggressive. It's
Yeah,
standing on your own
no.
feet.
I actually, with all emails, I'm like, if I send every email, if this was public,
Right.
would there be anything about this that you'd be like, oh my word, I can't believe that's public?
Yeah.
So that email, yeah, that's always sort of a guiding thing.
You said once that part of your integrity practice, as you can tell, I've been listening very closely to everything you've been
I
saying for
love
years,
it.
Rob. But you said once that part of your integrity practice is that there are certain things you do even when no one will see or know, because otherwise you will have no authority to stand in front of people and speak on these matters. That there's certain, again, you may not even remember having said this, but this
Yeah,
struck me that there's
yeah,
certain times where you'll find yourself making a choice or behaving in a certain way
yeah,
that no one would know, except you would know. And somehow
yeah,
that you knowing would hollow out your integrity or your authenticity to be able
yeah.
to help or speak or serve.
You can't take people somewhere you're not willing to at least try and go. And like staying on a stage, doing a podcast, being a spiritual teacher like that is just crazy.
It's a weird
And I think
profession.
at some young age, I was just in way over my head.
Yeah.
And I realized there's no way to explain this rationally. People listen, care, like the fact to this day that people would read my books. It just sort of, what? It just completely blows my mind. And trying to make sense of why I would talk and people would drive for miles to hear it. There wasn't any, and who are you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just some dude. The only thing that seemed to make any sense was then the only answer was to direct your path in such a way that you had some sense that you were pursuing your life with integrity. That was the only answer that made any sense to me.
Can you give me an example of something you would do or not do that doesn't register on, like, no, unwitnessed, don't get credit for it.
Oh man. See,
It's just
I don't like talking about those things.
since specificity is the soul of narrative.
Yeah. Oh man. So I hate talking publicly about stuff like there are people I've known for years who I'm still involved in their lives that I am trying to help them in all sorts of different ways.
Be more vague.
It's so awful. It's so awful.
And imagine
I'll
that
tell
by
you what.
telling a story, you might be of service, and maybe that'll make it easier for you to do it.
Yeah, okay. There is somebody who really, really, really wronged me. Wronged me financially, wronged me. I lost sleep for 6 months, 9 months, a year. It made me angry in the depths of my being.
Betrayal with a capital B.
I would, and realizing that I needed to forgive this person or it would spill over into every area of my life. It was like a consuming anger, like such a wrong. You know, when it's like a neon wrong that's like in the sky for you, and you can't stop thinking about it. And knowing the only path would be to quietly go through being able to forgiving them so that I could actually say their name and not just, and I knew that it would leak out into all these other areas if I didn't do that.
How did you do it?
Oh, it was awful.
Walk me through it, because this is a big issue for me. Forgiveness is this is top of my list of things I want to be better at.
And this person refused to acknowledge really basic facts. They
No accountability.
I like just talking about it makes so I knowing time is your friend on this. Knowing if tomorrow you have a little less white hot anger for them than you did today, then that's a step forward. Like, take every little victory you can get. This is somebody who was try to go through the particulars of who they are and their story and how they intersected with you, and try to see why they would have been that crazy. Is there anything about you and the way I act and move that would have influenced them to be completely like that duplicitous? So try to find, even though nothing in you wants to find some compassion, even just a reason why they might have done this. Maybe even just a reason. And if you can in any way get one tiny little grasp, a tiny little thread from the hem of their coat about the particulars of their life story, do you know what I mean? That might make you see them even slightly differently.
This is like aerobic empathy. This is like full contact.
Awful. Yeah.
Premier League.
And then I thought of this person's kids, because when I would think of their kids and I would say their kids' names, it would remind me that they're human, because when somebody wrongs you, it's easy.
Right.
Their being becomes what they did to you.
Yeah.
And if I could think of their kids, then I could remember that they're also a parent. Then I can remember also that they have a life and people who love them and people that care for them. And that if I could just keep remembering them in a life of loved ones, then it was a human. And it's much easier to forgive the human than it is a faceless evil.
Yeah.
And that just took a long time. And then not telling people the story like as a way of working through the anger.
Right.
Like you're telling, sometimes you're you got wronged, and so you tell this person the story about how you got, and you tell this person, and you
Yeah.
realize with each time you tell it, it gets a little less interesting. And it's like you're trying to forgive them by just repeating the story over and over until it's a
Washing the
boring
underwear
story.
so many times that the elastic breaks
Right,
on
exactly.
that story. Just like,
if I just tell
yeah.
the story enough, I'll be like, oh, okay.
So you did or didn't tell it again? and again?
Didn't in ways that would just keep it, like, do that work without dragging more people into it.
Yeah.
And essentially defaming them, like, this person you can't believe.
Well, or building a team against them, right?
Right,
Which is what
right.
Pema Chodron always talks about. It's
like-
the delicious,
right. It's like making a
delicious
case.
satisfaction of
Yes.
when everyone agrees with you, and
right.
we all agree on how
Right.
horrible this person is. It's
Right.
so comforting.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a big warm comfort that actually doesn't get you anything.
All you do is a bunch of people now are riled up against this person they never met.
Yeah.
So forgiveness.
Yeah.
Is that more specific?
Yeah. No, that's better
that
than
specific
that's
enough?
better than there are some people who I'm doing some stuff with.
I
I'd like
know.
to talk about in person. No,
You know,
and
I
it's
think- but
helpful because I think that's yeah.
I'm trying to think why I gave such a lame first answer.
Because you didn't want to go back in there. Maybe.
Because
I don't know why I'm telling you what you think and feel.
that's kind of
Let me
interesting.
tell you,
though.
let me break it down for you. I'm awesome at telling people what they're feeling. It's one of my favorite things to do. Oh, you're feeling like this because going back to the beginning of saying we don't know. Here I am. Here I am telling everyone. I'm just giving Pastor Rob Bell a little advice about his feelings. Everything that you just said about, and thank you for it, the candor and walking us through the many steps of that very difficult and painful and hard work. I mean, that's the thing about what you're talking
Yeah.
about is that it's hard work.
I actually think forgiveness.
It's so much hard
I
work.
think forgiveness is the deal.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that unlocks a million other things. Forgiving people who have wronged you so you're not carrying it around is actually how you set someone free and find out it was you. And I actually think it's a way, 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 way bigger deal than anybody talks about or realizes.
And all I wanted to do when you gave that list of what you had to do, which I'm just going to try to recap quickly for this purpose, it's like I tried to think of why in the world they might have seen it that way and tried to do that. I tried to remember that they were a human being. I tried to think of their family members and see them in a loving way. This generosity of searching with a jeweler's lab for some kind of grace or light about that person. I also want to take that same strategy and turn it inward for people who find it impossible to be kind and generous and friendly toward themselves.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the same exact steps.
Yeah.
Like when you're so full of remorse and shame about what you did, and then it's the same, right? Like, can you go back
Absolutely.
and remember who that person was, who you were, and think, why might she have thought that this was the right thing to do? Can you remember that you're a human and not just a failure?
And
Can
part of
you
forgiving
find a
this dude-
thread of the hem? You know,
Part of forgiving this person was realizing I could have done this or this or this differently. And realizing that mixed in and among all that was my own anger at myself for putting myself in a position where I got burned like that. So when I began to realize, oh, you're in there in a bunch of different ways. So there's a whole forgiving in every direction, setting people free all over the place. And turns out you're one of them. Was huge. And there's some art to letting yourself off the hook that it's like a muscle that you have to exercise it so that it can be built up.
when I was going through deep depression, I thought of it as a reverse CAT scan. So the horror of depression, as many people know, is those 4 to 5 a.m. wake up when it's too late to take a sleeping pill, too early to get up, you haven't slept anyway, and you wake up and before you're even conscious, you're already at war, right? You know, and I know no one who's listening to this knows at all what that feels like. I'm sure that no one's ever had this, you know, and I would lay there in the dark, and I was dark. I was in the dark, and I was dark. And I remember, it's because I just was reminded of this by the way you were talking about what you did with him, was exactly what I did with myself, which was do a full body and life and soul CAT scan, and instead of looking for doing what a CAT scan does, which is look for malignant cells among the healthy, look for healthy cells among the malignant, which are sometimes only 3 or 4.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that cancer can grow from like a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny
Yeah.
speck into taking over your entire body, grace can do the same with light.
Yeah.
You know, so all you need is 3 or 4 cells of light. And then the job for that day is how do we get it so tomorrow there's 6 or 10? You know, so what's good about me?
Yes.
Can I
yes.
grow it?
And you have to celebrate movement wherever you find it.
Yeah.
And you have to name it and affirm it and point it out to yourself. Hey, look,
This is
you're
better. You're doing
you're
better.
full of you have less venom in you than you did yesterday. Just a tiny
less
bit.
less self-hatred than you did
Yeah,
yesterday.
you have a little less. Look at that. Look at that. Look at you. You have to literally talk
Yeah.
to yourself like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Should we do lightning round?
Oh, my. Well, you really did.
I did preparation. I just have to go over my list and see if there's anything really vital. Am I keeping you too long? Rob Bell fans are like,
This is-
no, we want to hear him talk for the rest of time. One thing I did want to ask you to
Yes.
talk about is Dicky, not Ducky.
Oh, Dicky Shoehorn?
Dicky Shoehorn. Can you just tell, for people who have not read yet Rob's book, How
Yeah,
to
I
Be
used
Here,
to tell my kids, my boys,
just
these
tell
stories.
Dicky Shoehorn and what that means to you, like what Dicky Shoehorn is in your life, in your family's life, and what the
Yeah.
phrase Dicky lives means.
I used to tell my boys these stories at bedtime about Dicky Shoehorn, and I have no idea where it came from, but I love good names. Oh my goodness, I love good names. And Dicky Shoehorn, I was like, that's it. That's a name. And I would tell them these stories. And Dicky, you know, in improv, you both and. You just
Right.
Dicky was like both and. Like every situation he was up for. And so I would tell them these stories, and sometimes I get really lost in the deep weeds. Like the narrative had all these weird plot points and callbacks, and the boys would be like, Dad, this one's not working. They would just say straight up. The boys would just, but some of them were actually pretty good. And there was the one about his uncle Vince was just
I love that Dicky
Shark's
Shoehorn
tooth.
had an uncle named Vince.
shark's tooth necklace, hairy chest. He had a Ford Econoline van with a teardrop window, and he took a saw and cut out the middle so they could go on urban safaris, and like people could sit in an outdoor space. And one time, Dickie was at Uncle Vince's house, and Uncle Vince, they had this cereal for breakfast, and Dickie was like, Uncle Vince, this cereal's so good. I would swim in this cereal so I could. So the next time he comes over to Uncle Vince's house, Uncle Vince has drained his pool and filled his pool with this cereal, and Dickie got to swim in his favorite cereal. And that day, Dickie learned that you can have too much of a good thing. So that's like, and I would always try to have a moral at the end that was like so over the top. So then I have this friend named Alan Close, who's a great cartoonist, and I said, Alan, would you draw me? I told him all about Dicky Shoehorn. Will you draw me Dicky? So he drew me a Dicky, and when he showed it to me, I was like, oh my word, it looks just like Dicky. Which, oh, you can't make this up. It's so good. And then I was like, I should write up one of these stories. So I took one of them, wrote them up, and then Alan illustrated it. And I took it around and tried to get somebody to publish it, and nobody wanted it. And I had this whole pitch to the publisher, like, there'll be these T-shirts with Dickie's face on it that say Dickie lives, and I'll have like a cartoon. So we designed like this. Alan had this picture because volume 1 of The Adventures of Dicky Shoehorn was under Dickie's bed, and things happened under his bed. And so there's like Dickie lifting up. So the website would be like opening up like this. We had all.
You went full
I had
in.
the whole thing. I just had the whole thing, and nobody wanted to publish it. One publisher was like, "No, we don't actually think kids would like this story." And it was just such a cold, so cold. Not even try to rework it. It was just no. This isn't. No, it's like nobody wanted to see Dickie live, and so then I put it in a file. I just had put it like in a file in the garage. It's been in the garage for 7 or 8 years probably, and then I talk about this. I talk about the Dickie factor, which is that failure? I don't think that's failure. Nobody published it. Yeah, but I made something. That's how life works. Like the Dickie factor. You just keep making things and trying things. Some things work and some things don't, and some things end up in a file in your garage. That's actually how it works. And so then a couple weeks ago, I was on tour in Minneapolis, and I told the Dickie story And in the middle of the Dicky story, a dude stands up in the audience, pulls open his coat, and he has a Dicky Lives t-shirt. And just, the place goes nuts. And then he pulls out from like the back of his pants, unfurls this banner, this Dicky Lives banner. I have it out in the back house. This Dicky Lives. So we're talking about, I think we're going to make some Dicky Lives t-shirts. Like I'm actually now, I think, going to maybe even publish. I'd like to publish the book just myself if nobody else wants it, because it just makes me laugh.
There's so much anxiety in people's lives over, does this work? Is this a thing?
And this is what's really important.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have people who are like, I'm thinking about writing, but I have all these fears. I'm thinking about, and you just make it. And people will always be like, yeah, but you're Rob Bell. I'm like, no.
Was not born Rob Bell.
No. You start making things.
Right.
And anybody who you've seen, or you're like, yeah, but it's so-and-so. Okay, that's how so-and-so is so-and-so.
Right.
Because they had a stupid idea and they tried it. And then they had another idea. And then somewhere in there, what percentage of your ideas made it and got published?
All of them. I don't know what you're talking about. You have a weird creative process, Rob, because mine is very like, I have a vision board. And what I do is I just put the title, everything is like right there, and then it's just like taking dictation, and it always everything works, and it's just always successful. It's just always successful.
But but you know the Dicky factor.
Of course. And
you literally just try all these things.
Yeah. You know, Rhea and I, my dear friend Rhea, who's been popped, who's in the room and has popped in on the thing.
There she is.
So when we talk about things you do to remain authentic, when I was writing Big Magic, after I wrote Big Magic, I was like, I have to make sure I'm always throwing down completely with creativity now, because I go out and tell people to be creative.
Yeah.
So I always thought I would love to write poetry, but I never did, because I always said, I never took a class and I don't know what it is. But then I overhear myself saying that. I'm like, you're not allowed to do that anymore, because you tell people to do stuff like that.
Oh, yeah,
So I started writing poetry. I'm like, oh, geez, I got to write poetry now. And it wasn't great, but no one died from it. And then my number of deaths from my poetry is still at 0. And then I was like, but I'm not going to show anybody because it's not. And I'm like, I have to, because I always tell people. So I showed Rhea, and she said, well, I don't know if these are poems, but some of these could be lyrics. And so we should write a song. So I said, but I can't write it.
Right,
so we start writing a song. Then she's like, we should record it. And again, each step, I'm like, except that I can't get on there and tell people to do this if I'm not doing it. So a couple months ago, we're in the recording studio with some friends, and we made a song. And it was awesome. We spent a day in writing a song about these callow kids who are friends with a guy only because he has a van. And again, it's not the world's greatest song, but like no fatalities. And the next day, I was at an office in New York having a business meeting in the publishing world, and somebody said, "How was your weekend?" I said, "Amazing." I spent the weekend in a recording studio with like 4 of my favorite people, just making a song. It was great, and they sort of went blank, and one of them said, "What's it for?" And it was such a great question, Rob, because I was like, "What is a song for?" That's a really good question. What's it for?
Is this a philosophical question or a business question?
What is it for?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, I found myself stammering, going, "It's for because Thursday there wasn't it, and now there is it.
Yes.
It's for that.
Yeah. Yes.
It's for Dicky Lives.
Absolutely.
You know, it's for because we did."
Yeah. No, that is, yes. I got into this because I preached a sermon, and I was like, this would get me up in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm going to make these. And if 9 people listen, I'll be having a blast. It never started with, oh my word, we're going to do something big in the world. It started with,
I want to win iTunes
whatever.
One Podcast of the Year award.
To this day, it is absolutely, there's a thing in you that you have to make.
Yeah.
That's the only way it works.
Okay, lightning round.
Oh my God.
We're going to wrap it up with that. I've got 7 words. I'm going to give you these 7 words, and you just say something about these words. Ready?
Okay.
Liberation. You want me to skip it? You hate that one?
No.
I'm just kidding, Rob.
I literally have 9 ideas.
Okay.
I actually believe that there is a divine presence at work in human history working to liberate us from whatever we are enslaved to. And it always begins with the cry. It begins with crying out. Everything begins with the moment of crying out in powerlessness. And until you're there, there can't be liberation because you aren't ready to acknowledge you need to be liberated. The whole thing starts with the cry. It starts with crying out. And the cry is what kicks in gear the extraordinary movement towards liberation.
Consolation.
That's why I paused.
Oh my God! For those of you listening at home, Rob Bell just took off his
slammed
head mic.
down my headset?
He took his headset and just dropped it. He just
I did
dropped
not.
it.
It's still firmly on.
Oh, it's still firmly
Okay, we have
on.
6 words to go. Next one.
Consolation.
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 Some of the most interesting things happen not when you're winning and accumulating and conquering, but when you are joined in your pain, loss, heartbreak, and suffering by another. And that consolation, that moment when somebody sits with you, I think is how the whole thing turns. I think that's where the really interesting stuff happens.
Ray is over on the couch doing this kind of victory dance at that answer. She just, that's it. She's. I think we can call that the Dicky dance. Transformation.
I realized that there are a number of ways you can communicate in the world. You can simply do transmission, which is you were taught this and now you're passing it along. So you were taught this in science, this in religion, this in education, and now what you're doing is just transmitting the information to the next person. Then there's translation, which is when you have heard something and now you are giving it a story, a metaphor, a simile, an analogy. You are doing the work of taking it and translating it so that somebody else who might not have access to it in its original form might have access to it. Then there is transformation, which is when you aren't just transmitting information that you were handed and you handed it on, and you aren't just translating, taking that and maybe putting a new twist on it, but transformation is when you are witnessing to that which has done something to you. And now you aren't just saying, well, I've been told by the authorities these are the 4 major things, and now I'm handing you the 4 major things. But you are saying, yeah, I climbed that mountain of forgiving that person. And I'm going to tell you what I learned climbing that mountain. Because you've actually been transformed. And now you're witnessing to what actually transformed you. So if you are a little less angry towards your father than you were yesterday, then you can witness to the movement from that bit of anger to a little less anger. And that's transformation. And that's what I discovered as I got older and worked at this was, oh, there's another place to go to. Which is when you are witnessing to that which you have actually experienced.
I like lightning round. Conversation.
The whole thing is a conversation. The whole thing. The whole thing. That's the whole thing. We're all talking. That's the beauty. It's like a dance. We're talking. We're dancing. That's how it works. Yeah, that's how I feel about the RobCast. I know I'm talking, but we're having a conversation. That's how I feel about it.
Creation.
Good Lord, don't even get me started. I think we create our lives. We take part in the ongoing creation of the world. And for many people, the world's already fixed. It's set. Its boundaries are in place. And so you essentially try to find your place in it. But the whole thing, I think it's unfinished. So we take part in the ongoing creation of the world. And so we are making the world and we are creating our lives. And everybody has more power to create their life than they realize. I believe that with all my heart.
Celebration.
Yeah, I actually think joy is the engine of the universe. Because joy is a fundamentally generative reality. Like when you say, isn't that song awesome? What you did, your joy immediately when you say, isn't that song awesome? What you are doing is this, that question is actually an invitation because I think that song is awesome. And the first instinct is to invite you to share in it with me. So joy is generative. It naturally reaches out and brings others in. And I think you can start with particles to atoms to molecules to cells to 13.8 billion years of evolution, however you want to see the expanding universe that we're living in and the expansion of our hearts. But ultimately, the whole thing is at some level driven by a joy that just keeps overflowing, making more and more and more. That there is some celebration, even amidst all the dark and chaos and entropy and all that's falling apart, there is something that just keeps going, come on, you know something's going on here. You know something's going on here. Come on, come on,
You
come
do
on,
know.
come on.
The last word, California.
Home. Yeah, home. I have very vivid memories. My mom grew up in California, and I grew up in Michigan, and we would visit California every other Christmas. And I have vivid memories of not far from here, like LA, 7, 9 years old. The grass, the soil, like this is at some level where I'm from. It's very interesting. And Chris and I, since we lived here, we were first married, we lived here, and this has always had some strange pull. And then living here the past 5 years, it's like we're home.
Was it hard to give yourself permission to have this be home?
No, no.
I'm
No,
glad to hear that.
it felt like, oh yeah, we're home.
Took a long time to get here.
And
Kristen
had
just said.
just had
Yeah.
really wonderful experiences along the way. But yeah, California somehow, like this city, Los Angeles. I've always, if you would ask me whatever stage, what's your favorite city in the world, I would have been like, yeah, LA.
Why?
It's just a hot mess.
What is your LA?
Okay, my LA is
What's the love story?
there is something about the ocean has always pulled me at some level. There is something about storytellers. This is where people come to tell stories. There's something about tacos.
There is.
Honestly,
There is.
honestly. And then Fairfax District right here is like sort of urban skate culture epicenter. Also happens to be traditionally Jewish, where the kosher deli and Cantor's Deli, and then the hipster restaurant with no sign out front, next to the thrift store, next to the $100 T-shirt store. It's just it's all this difference just piled in.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's all here, and it's just so funky, and I love it. I love it. And who did I meet? Okay, here's why I love it. Yesterday, Preston and I, my son, are at the guitar shops trading a bass amp for another bass amp, and the guy behind the cash register hears me and my friend who's with Preston and I talking about a short film he just wrote. And the cashier says, the guy checking us out, "Oh, really? You guys make stuff?" We're like, "Yeah, we make stuff." And he's like, "I just made a play, and I made my play in Shakespearean English." And we're like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, there's a guy here in town who you can just speak English, and then he will just
He's like
type,
Google Translate into
he will
Shakespearean
type
English.
Shakespeare." He's like, "Check this out." Pulls out his phone and reads a section of his play that's in Shakespearean English, and it's really, really profound and funny by this like goateed, long-haired dude checking us out at the guitar shop, and you're like,
LA.
let's go get tacos. You know what I mean? It's just exactly the beautiful weirdness. Yeah.
Rob Bell, thank you for coming
You
on
know,
the Rob Bell podcast.
It was
I mean,
great.
it's just, I want you to come back. I feel like my people would love to hear more from you. You know, anytime you're in town, come to the back house. I want to hear more of what you're doing. Everybody, you should read How to Be Here. Rob Bell's the greatest. And thank you for trusting me with your 100th episode. It's so cool. And I want to just thank you for these 100 episodes because I've listened to all 99 of them. And it's been such a companion to my life that I can't really remember how I figured stuff out before. And I know that a lot of other people would say the same thing, so I'm hoping that I can thank you for that. And I got to tell you, everybody, I think this world is it used to say that I've just heard somebody say recently, information used to be power, but now it isn't anymore because there's too much of it. So now it's wisdom that's power. And I have met so many teachers and healers, and, I mean, this is the world that you and I move in. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't want any more information. If I need it, I have it on I have literally all the world's collected information on my phone. If I
Yeah.
need it, I can just look it up, right? I want two things. I want wisdom and I want light. And when I'm going through the world looking for those two things, because I'm heliotropic, this is, like sunflowers who turn toward the light, all I want is light. And so when I meet people who are teachers, the only question I have of them, and I'm asking it with every cell of my body when I meet them, is, do you have more light than me? Because if you do,
Yeah.
I want to talk to you. And if you don't, I can't learn anything from you that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because you might know a lot of more stuff than me, and you might have a lot more degrees, and you might be more creative, and you might be smarter. But all I want is the source of light that you've tapped into, and I want you to walk me through how you did it. And you have more of that, Rob, than anybody who I've met living. And that's why I always am bothering you and hanging around because I want that more of what you know. And I know that that's why we're all here listening to you on the RobCast week after week after week. And I hope you keep shedding your light that way because it's beautiful and we're grateful. So, on behalf of all of the listeners, of which I am a proud member, we love you and thank you. And we can't wait for the next 100.
Thank you. That means the world.